All right, Casey, for lesson 6.9, number 4, it says Thelma spent 1/6 of her weekly allowance on dog toys, 1/4 on a dog collar, and 1/3 on dog food. What fraction of her weekly allowance is left? All right, so this one is two parts. First, we need to figure out how much she actually spent. So she spent 1/6, 1/4, and 1/3. Now, of course, to add these, we have to find common denominators. Looking at them, I know 12 is the next common denominator for all of these. So I'm going to convert them all to fractions with a 12. I have to multiply 6 by 2 to get 12. So I have to multiply my numerator by the same. I have to multiply 4 by 3 to get 12. And I have to multiply 3 by 4 to get 12. Okay, so now I have my fractions that are all common denominators, so I can add them. 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 4 is 9. So she spent 9/12 of her allowance. And it's asking how much of her allowance is left. So I have to start with a whole, or 1, which is 12/12. Because if you have a fraction where the numerator and the denominator are the same, that's equal to 1. So 12/12 is 1. So that's the whole amount she received for her allowance minus the 9/12 that she spent. So 12 minus 9 is 3. So she has 3/12 left, which of course I can reduce to 1/4. So she has 1/4 of her allowance left. Oops, sorry about that. And let's see. Oh, let me pull my book and I can go over that top problem. I'm not able to read the words out of the picture. So that one is number 1. So we have Caitlin has 4 3/4 pounds of clay. She uses 1 1/10 pound to make a cup and another 2 pounds to make a jar. How many pounds are left? Okay, so walking through the steps, the first step asks us to write an equation to model the problem. Okay, so we know she started with 4 3/4 pounds. So that's our total amount. She has used 1 1/10. Then she used 2 pounds. And then some number we don't know makes up what's left. Okay? So here is our equation. So then the second step says work backwards and rewrite the equation to find x. Remember, x is our unknown. So we want to get x by itself, which means we want x on the side of the equal sign with no other numbers. So on this side, we have added the 1 1/10 and the 2. So if we subtract them from this side, they are no longer there, and x is by itself. And then whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other. So we would subtract from this side 1 1/10 and 2, and that's going to equal your x. So now if we solve this side of it, we would find what x equals. And then of course the next step is to actually solve it. Okay, now just like we did on the number 4 and as we've done in the past lessons, we cannot subtract fractions that have different denominators. So we need to make sure they all have the same denominator. So right now I'm seeing a 4 and a 10, and the 2 doesn't have any denominator. So I know my next common denominator is going to be 20 between these two numbers. And I have to multiply 4 by 5 to get to 20, which means I have to multiply 3 by 5. Then I have to multiply 10 by 2 to get to 20. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 2. And then I'm subtracting 2. Okay, so if I have 4 minus 1 is 3, minus 2 is 1. 15 minus 2 is 13, and my denominator is 20. Okay, so my answer is she has 1 13/20 of pounds of clay left. Okay, so that's how you would work out that one. And then you had a question mark, let's see, number 6. Right? Yes. Number 6 says, what if Martin makes a hole and two sets of paddles and struts? How much wood does he have left? And this was the one we had to look back to number 5 to get how many feet of wood each part of that used. Okay, so number 5 tells us he started with 5.5 feet of wood. He uses 2 3/4 feet for the hole, 1 1/4 feet for paddles and struts. Okay, so we know from number 6 he is making a hole, so that is 2 3/4 feet of wood, and he is making 2 sets of paddles and struts. Number 5 tells us one set is 1 1/4, but he is making 2, so we have to add that twice. Okay, so first we're going to add up to see how much wood he uses to make all of this, and then we'll subtract that from the amount of wood he started with. Now for this one, it's nice, we already have common denominators, so we don't have to change them at this point. So 2 plus 1 plus 1 is 4. 3 plus 1 plus 1 is 5, and our denominator is 4. Now looking at this fraction, we have 5/4. We don't want to leave that fraction improper or a fraction that's greater than 1. We know this fraction is greater than 1 because the numerator is larger than the denominator. So remember, as I said up here with the 12/12, that equals 1, right? If you have the same number in the numerator and the denominator, it's 1. So I can take from 5/4, I can take 4/4 away from that and make a 1. Okay, so my 4 then becomes 5 because I'm taking 1 away from this fraction and I'm adding it to the whole. Now when I subtract 4/4 from 5/4, I am left with 1/4. Okay, so this is how much wood he used, but it says how much wood does he have left? And again, we have to look back to number 5. Number 5 says he started with 5.5 feet and he used 5 1/4 feet, or 5 1/4. So we have to figure out how much wood does he have left. Well, in order to subtract, I have to make common denominators. I know I can multiply this by 2 and get 4. So I'm going to have 5 and 2. Oops, I've run out of room. So I'll write it next to it. So 5 1/2 becomes 5, and 2/4 minus 5 1/4. 5 minus 5 is 0, so we no longer have a whole number. 2 minus 1 is 1. denominator stays the same. So he has 1/4 foot of wood left. And it looks like those were all your questions for lesson 6.9.